Friends, we move into the next session, and this is basically once more a panel discussion. And moderating the panel discussion would be once again Kiruba Shankar, Chief Executive Officer of Business Blogging Private Limited. It's time for us to begin the second panel, and let us have a big round of applause once more for Kiruba. You did a wonderful job this morning, and I would request Kiruba to kind of introduce the rest of the panel. The topic for the panel discussion is powerful digital strategies for business to use to acquire young customers of the mobile first generation. Kiruba Shankar.
Thank you. We have a fantastic Mr. Vaiteeswaran, e-commerce pioneer and startup mentor, someone who really started the e-commerce revolution here in India. Vaiti, please. Up next is Abhishek Rangta, founder and CEO of IndusNet Technologies. Abhi. Ashwin Dias, General Manager East of Uber India. And Piyush Surana, Business Head East, Ola Cabs. Abhishek is sitting between Ola chief and Uber chief. So unlike in real world when both of them really fight with each other, both of them have to be really, really good buddies. So that's a good sign. All right. The focus is how do we grow businesses? How do we get paying customers and retain them? And that's going to be the crux of the panel discussion for now. So before we jump into it, I'm going to request Ashwin to get started and just introduce yourself, please. You can pick up a mic out there.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks, Kiruba. It's a real pleasure to be here. My name is Ashwin Dias. I am the general manager for Uber in the East. I moved to Calcutta about 18 months ago, and so far the city has been an excellent host to me. We've got a lot of love from both the riders and the drivers. It's been an absolute pleasure. Prior to this, I spent 4 years as part of the founding team of Zoomin.com, which is an e-commerce company based in Bombay. We did various things in the photography space, ranging from personalized print products to actually retailing equipment. Prior to that, I have a couple of other failed experiences as an entrepreneur. So this is a really interesting topic for me, and look forward to some interesting insights and conversations.
Thanks, Ashwin. Abhi?
I am Abhishek Rungta, founder and CEO of IndusNet Technologies. It's a Kolkata headquartered full-service digital company, mainly in the business of web application, mobile application, and digital marketing. So we work in 5 countries and across India. And we have been working with mid-sized to large corporates as well as agencies. Thank you.
Thanks, Abhi. Hi, my name is Piyush Surana. I head business for Eastern India as well as all the tier 3 markets for Ola, which are our long tail markets. A bunch of 60 cities, so interesting experiences everywhere, a lot of local market flavor. Before this, interestingly, I was actually working at Uber, so that's kind of interesting. And another amazing experience as well. Prior to that, I have worked across a bunch of industries, investment banking, telecom, and healthcare. So looking forward to the discussion here.
Hi, my name is Vaiteeswaran. It's a big pleasure to be in Calcutta. I have about 30 plus years of total experience. I worked for the first 15 years for the Murugappa Group. I spent 10 years in Wipro. In 99, I co-founded the first e-commerce company in India. It was called FabMart. In 2002, I co-founded another e-commerce company called FabMall.com. We also opened a chain and co-founded a grocery supermarket chain, which became the second largest supermarket chain in India. It's called FabMall and was subsequently acquired by the Aditya Birla Group. It's called More now. I'm told there are a few outlets in Calcutta these days. And I also ran an e-commerce company called India Plaza till about 2013. It's the longest running e-commerce company in India. No company so far has crossed 14 years. Currently, I consult with some large brands like Deloitte and the Tata Group and Diageo. I also do some angel investments and mentor several startups, most of them in Bangalore. I'm based in Bangalore.
Great. Thank you, Vaiti. They say that starting a company is fairly easy. It's not that complicated. But getting your first set of 1,000 customers is your benchmark for success and how you do that. So I'm going to throw that across the panel. If you can just dig deep into your experience, specific experience, not Ola, not Uber, the international, but out here, you covering the territory, how did you crack the first 1,000 customers? Ashwin?
So how did we get our first 1,000 customers? I think if this happens in multiple cities. So whenever we launch a new city, it's always the first challenge to get the first set of drivers on board and the first set of riders on board, right? Obviously, as with time, more people know about the brand and therefore there is additional pull there. But I think if we go back to Calcutta and think about how we got the first few drivers on board and the first 1,000 riders on board, I think from the driver perspective, it was more convincing them about this model and what the benefits are, right? So typically, and you talk to them from what was the status quo at that point in time, right?
When was this? Which year was this?
It's actually going to be 2 years next month, right? So in the travel business, driver partners who had cars were not used to this model of flexibility where they could drive for a few hours today, take the day off tomorrow, and so on and so forth, right? So the way you essentially convince them to take a punt and try your service is that this is complementary. It's not exclusive. It's not that I'm saying you stop your travel business and then start using Uber. The days you don't have any bookings to go from here to Kharagpur or wherever, you actually come onto our platform, and that's the way we started off. I think the key is obviously to get the first 10 or 20 drivers who absolutely love your service, right? And the people who we got on board initially, we spent a lot of time ensuring that every aspect of their experience with our brand is phenomenal. And they eventually became advocates for the rest of the drivers to come and join our platform, right? Similarly, on the rider side, obviously there are a certain amount of people who have tried the service in other cities in India and across the world. And if they don't actually talk about your service, then it's a failed concept, right? So when we used to launch earlier, we used to launch something called secret Ubers, which basically means we just turn on the city, and there are about 10 to 50 cars in the city, and we don't tell anybody about it. But there are 1 or 2 people who try it, and we put out a blog. So there's a small base of people who start trying the service, and that's how it generates, right? So the first few weeks is just purely word of mouth.
And like Prashant said, are the first 100 people influencers that you handpick?
So it actually depends, right? In some places, we do a few things like we get somebody who's an influencer in the city to actually take the first trip, and we call them Rider Zero. But in some cases, it's just people who have been following us on Facebook or Twitter, and they find out about it, and then they try it, and they go on recommending. And till date today, 6 years in across the world, referrals or word of mouth is obviously one of our biggest channels for acquisition, both on the rider side and on the driver side.
So, but did Ola make it easier for you guys? Because they were here before you. They educated the market.
So I think in Calcutta, actually, we launched slightly before Ola. But I think by the time we had launched, we launched Bangalore as the first city in India 3 years ago, right? So 1 year later, we launched in Calcutta. So there was already a large amount of awareness about the product, right? But if you go into smaller towns, maybe the awareness is a little less, the use cases are fewer, but it's the same thing. The first, I think, in any business, right? If I go back to when I was at Zoom In and we were building various businesses, the first people who try your product, if they are not happy, right, it's going to be very difficult for you to scale that product across. So that's the first thing, right? You may make sure your product is right and you have people who love your service and actually can recommend it.
Correct. That's a very valuable lesson, right? Your first set of customers is someone who has to say good things about it, and then the word of mouth kickstarting. So, Abhi, I know that you are unlike everybody else in the group. You run a B2B services company. So obviously 1,000 number would be something you'll be super happy about. It's not that high, I would assume. So how did you get your first set of customers?
I can share a little bit of a B2B angle to it, and getting 1,000 customers is also not recommended for a B2B company.
Not recommended?
I mean, according to me, it's not recommended if you are not a 20,000 people company.
Got it.
So yeah. I think getting customers in B2B, the main objective here is to create something which is no-brainer and something which basically solves a current problem, gives a new take on the problem, and let people enjoy the benefit who comes and subscribe to your service or product. It's easier said than done. So when we started around 18 years back, at that time, it was unheard for a company in Western world to outsource something over internet, for a small business to medium-sized business, to outsource something over internet and get it done entirely online without any physical intervention. And I think that was an interesting moment that we created, where we said that we will rather do business with overseas companies rather than Indian company at that time. And we built that business out there. So we created a product, an offering, which was packaged right, placed right, priced right. I think in today's world, we call it product market fit. We discovered that without knowing the terminology. And I think once you know the terminology, then the marketing becomes simpler, because if you do the right things, people start buying from you. And when people start buying from you and you can keep the promise that you make in your pitch, I think then people start talking about you. So I think there's a lot of money being spent on marketing, despite of the fact that a lot of companies are not keeping up the promise. I think that is one big learning that we had, that we must keep the promise, because at the end of the day, that's what will yield positive word of mouth. And once that starts happening, then you basically move on.
Yeah, and especially in services business, you actually make money out of repeat customers.
Yes.
The same customer giving you extra business coming in.
Absolutely.
Right?
And second thing is basically you need to always stay ahead of your time in terms of your marketing. So I still remember when we got online, just few months back, a company came online called elance.com. I know in recent times you find every freelancer on elance.com, but as a fresh startup with just one person in the room, for us to discover and put all our bet on elance.com was a big deal. Before it became crowded, we moved on to something called goto.com. If you remember, since you are quite old in the industry, Goto was the company
You just call me old.
It's okay. You have got gray hairs, I have got gray hairs.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So did you, would that be a takeaway for youngsters? So how many of you are students or youngsters about to start off on your entrepreneurial journey? Raise your hands. Someone? Okay, it's just so who is interested, might be useful for them to really learn about upwork.com and elance.com, freelancer.com. That'd be something you
That was something which we started with long time back. We worked on that for a 6 months.
Would you recommend it for the current generation?
Not today, because when we did it, it was a big change. That was something that was, which was out of the way, which was a new way altogether. People used to work in a different way at that time. So it changed the status quo. Today, it is the status quo for lots of freelancers. In fact, it's an extremely crowded place to do business.
Okay.
So I will definitely not recommend. So the whole idea of telling this is that we need to find our own way, and the new way has to be different and has to be something on which you can, once you have tried, you can place your bet on. So yeah. So again, as I said, after Elance, we moved on to goto.com, which was the first pay-per-click search engine. So you need to kind of keep finding new ways to generate leads and do marketing and move on and scale it up.
What's your current overseas revenues versus Indian revenues? What's your?
Still our overseas revenue is 85% versus Indian revenue of 15%.
Dollars are always better, no?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Thanks, Abhi.
Thanks.
So, Piyush?
Yeah, I mean, something that Abhi already touched on, I think is really, really important is whatever communication you have, and that's really important for digital media, is it has to stand out and be interesting. If it's the same thing that you're saying that other people are saying, it doesn't. So people today have a million choices and even lesser time. So if it's the same thing that they've heard over and over again, they're not interested. And in some ways, what digital marketing is actually quite the opposite of what traditional marketing does. So, traditional marketing, or the champions are basically, your FMCG companies. What they used to do was do the average, sell the average product for the average consumer, because that is what mass marketing is. Whereas we do quite the opposite when you come to digital marketing. You're actually looking for the early adopters and the innovators. So this is actually where a lot of, the companies which are already there, the traditional companies, trip up. Because it's very different to go from the middle of the market to the edges, where you find your, the early adopters and the innovators. And Ashwin touched on it with Uber. So these are the guys who first use your product, and these are the guys who will then be your biggest champion. In some cases, these early adopters are as big for you as your own team in the city, because they can champion you much more out in the market, right? So you get this one early adopter who will, so that's how I heard about Ola the first time, which is a friend came up to me and said, have you heard of this service? It's amazing. You call this guy and in 5 minutes you get a car at your home. And that's, I used it, I found it amazing, and I passed it on to 5 other people. And that's how digital marketing works, is that you look at the early adopters, the innovators, and they will be your biggest strength going forward.
It's not just the word of mouth though, right, to be honest. It is the fact that you have an hassle-free ride. It's the fact that you get cabs that are cheaper than, and you don't have to haggle. Those are some things that collectively work really.
No marketing can help you unless your product is good. Marketing can only help people use it for the first time. Obviously, they're not going to go and promote your product unless the product itself is really strong, right?
So I want you to go back to your days when you were still hadn't even joined Uber, I would assume, when you heard of Ola. So what, in your opinion, did Ola do fantastic? At least it's understandable for Uber. It's a global product, already established itself damn good, potloads of money. But Ola coming in with just an idea, right, and then kickstarted. So how do you know the history of it, and how did they crack the Indian market?
Ola actually started as a day trip, sort of a very traditional model, which was we used to give cars for rent for 8 hours, 4 hours, and very funnily, we've actually turned that whole circle and come back to that now. But that's how we actually started. But we realized that it does not solve the biggest problem for people, which is going from one spot in the city to another. So if you have an idea that sort of solves for the biggest problem that the consumer base has, and we actually believe at Ola that we want to be like a utility services company, which is like a part of your life. So it's, as long as the product is very strong, I know marketing can help you, but as long as that product is so strong that it covers a basic aspect of your life, it really helps. So, but then the basics are still the same when it comes to digital marketing. Obviously, we use other sorts of marketing as well, and which gets you visibility out there. But when you talk of digital marketing, as long as your product is really strong, and you have those early champions, so, the law of diffusion of innovation says some 16%, some 2.5% are innovators, some 13.5% of your market are the early adopters. Once you get to that 16%, the rest of the, the market will follow, as long as you can crack that first 16%. So that is what I think we did really well, to get those first 16% of the people to use us, and then obviously recommend our services to other people. And that's how you spread the word.
Perfect. Thank you, Piyush. Vaiti, you started Fab Mart, Fab Mall, India Plaza at a time when people were afraid to use credit cards because people thought they will steal away your password, right? So people had one, they were very, very careful. So how did you get started? What gave you the guts, to move from such cushy jobs like in Wipro and in Murugappa Group and turn into something that's very, very unique?
Well, I think the first thing you need to have to leave a cushy job and start something like this is to have a mixture of bravery and stupidity. Right? You need to be brave and stupid at the same time, because nobody does what you're saying. And why would I leave a nice job in Wipro and start in e-commerce at a time when nobody had even heard of internet? So I guess it was stupidity. You're right. I think the biggest challenge we faced in those days was people didn't even know how to add an item to cart. People didn't know what is a checkout. And I think there was nobody in India to learn from. The only other e-commerce site available that we could look at was Amazon.
But it wasn't available to Indians though.
No, it wasn't available to, I'm not sure, perhaps some Indians were logging in and using it, but must be very, very handful of people. But I think the biggest problem we faced is, if you go back and if you look at how e-commerce has evolved, Amazon used American terms, right? So when you exit, you said checkout. Nobody in India checks out, right? I mean, today we all check out because it's a digital organization. I mean, we're all digital, so we go online, we check out. But in 99, nobody had even heard of the word checkout. So we spent a lot of time trying to figure out whether we should use an Indian word for it. We couldn't come out for an Indian word, so we said, let's stick to checkout. And then we went and met a whole lot of people, but the biggest challenge is they were all frightened of putting their credit card on the internet, right? I mean, they believed that if somebody put their credit card on the net, somebody like me sitting on the other end and noting down the numbers, right? I mean, it takes a long time for people to realize that we don't even see the numbers. So the way we got our first customers was, essentially we went to our friends, people that I knew personally, people the other co-founders knew personally. We were selling music cassettes when we started. Each cassette cost $50. So we said, look, if something happens, we'll pay you back the money. But we forced them to try. But 1,000 customers was a large number in those days. I mean, today that's what people get orders in a minute. There are no 1,000 customers. But to come back to your point, I think the challenge, I'm not a big fan of the first customer, right?
You're really,
I'm not a big fan of this first customer.
or maybe we say first customer, first 1,000 customers.
Yeah, first customer, I mean, it's B2B, it's first 2-3 customers. If it's B2C, first 1,000 customers. I think it's very easy to get those, right? A little bit of hustle, you can get those first customers. To me, the most critical parameters is how many of those customers are staying back to transact a second time and a third time, right? And the reason I'm saying it's easy, I'm not simplifying the task, but if you've got a Tiger and a Sequoia writing blank checks, 1,000 customers, what a big deal. I mean, if you can't get 1,000 customers with so much of money, you must be stupid. So I think how many of them stay back and how much did it cost to get those customers who stay back, I think that's the real crux. I'm not sure people have solved that problem yet. So I wouldn't focus on the first customers. I would say how many are staying back to transact and how much did it cost the company to get those customers in the first place would probably a far more important parameter.
So Piyush and Ashwin, I'm going to ask you a very uncomfortable question, right? It's heard that Uber and Ola, for every single transaction, you're actually running a loss at every transaction. We can switch off the cameras if you want to, but what would be your answer?
So I think it depends how you look at it, right? So I'll actually take a step back. So when we started e-commerce at ZoomIn, people like, oh, e-commerce, it's such an easy business to run. You don't have to pay rent. You don't have to pay salaries to people. You just have to sell, right? I mean, it's a no-brainer. But people, even today, when you go, like where does the money go that a Tiger or a Sequoia puts into a Flipkart, right? It basically goes to customer acquisition, right? And at the initial days, you have to invest some amount of money to acquire those customers, right? And in our business, to answer your question specifically, right? In our business, it's all about efficiency, right? It's about ensuring two things, right, broadly. One is that on the driver side, that he's doing enough trips per day so that, he can cover his costs. Because essentially, if you look at the economics on the driver side, it's all a fixed cost model, right? The car is fixed, the guy's time is fixed. So the more trips he can do per day, the better revenue he can generate, right? Yes, so in the initial days of any city, you are essentially ensuring that you're covering for that efficiency and you're spending some money there. The second is some amount of money is spent to acquire a customer. So on Uber, we've got the give-get model, which is basically, I can give you if I introduce you to the service, you get a free ride and I get a free ride, right? Yes, that is giving the free ride for the first time, but as Vadi mentioned that, so getting those free rides is very easy, but if the guy doesn't come back and take subsequent rides, then it's a problem, right? But what we've seen, if you go back to the early days of Uber, it was an Uber Black service, wherein each trip used to basically cost like $100, right? And the reason why people still took it is because they got really nice cars, and they would use it on special occasions, right? Or when they were going out, for a fancy dinner with their wives, or going out for a client meeting. But the difference was that there was a high amount of repeat, right? Sure. Naturally. So, but when you're trying to grow the business, then you have got to expand, and that's why Uber has moved into lower segments and made it basically affordable to everybody.
And the beautiful thing is that you're also playing on human psychology, which is, this is the mental muscle. When you start using a service often enough, and that comes as default for you the next time around, right? So this is a
Right.
stickiness factor. And Uber and both Ola have done some phenomenal work in that space.
So I think there are, I mean, to answer your question in another way, right? There are companies that, have spent a lot of money giving freebies, but have not been able to retain the customers, right? And if you're unfortunately in a world, I think, in the last 4-5 years, there was enough VC money in India that people were just throwing money at the problem, right? If you can throw money at the problem, yes, you will see growth. And there are what we call vanity metrics, right? So downloads is a vanity metric. Likes on Facebook is a vanity metric, right? If the guy is not generating income for you, then it doesn't deliver any good for the company.
Got it.
Just to add to that, and if I may, I just want to step back, and this is an anecdote I share a lot, and on a lot of occasions I've shared this earlier as well. So it starts back up almost more than 100 years back when the light bulb was first invented. Now today we all know as light bulb as one of the most ubiquitous things that we use, right? I mean, everyone uses it every day in our homes. But the best part about this is when Edison actually invented the light bulb, what was he supposed to do with it? Because there was no power sockets at homes, there were no power connection, there was no electricity grid at all. So the next thing that he did was he actually built a power station in Manhattan and had 59 houses connected to it to sell a bulb. Now, if we stop at that point of time, right, when he had just built that, and so 59 houses and a power station to sell a bulb. I mean, if we were talking at that point of time, obviously it would seem very stupid. Today we don't call Edison stupid, right? I mean, not saying all of those ideas become successful. Maybe if someone else had come along, if Tesla had been able to sell his way of transporting electricity, which actually we use now, maybe Edison would not have been so successful. But sometimes you do have to invest in getting customers, and sometimes you have to invest in making your product very, to get it out in the market, because the market is big enough to cover it. So that's also something that.
Got it. Thank you, Piyush. And Vaiti, you have such tremendous respect in the entrepreneurial world because you came out when you had to exit India Plaza and you didn't succeed very well, but you came out bravely and you shared your experience, which is very unlike what you would see from anybody else coming in. So full respect to you for that. So can you educate the audience on what are some of the most important lessons that you had from your entrepreneurial journey, especially from India Plaza, and you had to shut down India Plaza. What takeaway points will you give for our audience?
Well, actually lots, but let me just get a few important things out here. One is, I think we learn a lot more from failure than we do from success. The human mind is not equipped to ask questions as to why we succeeded. And a lot of people get carried away by success. A lot of entrepreneurs, if their ventures are successful, believe that they are singularly responsible for the success without understanding why they succeeded. So in my case, I think all the lessons that I've learned came from the failure rather from the success. So we did manage to start a company, sold it off for a few $100 million. But I really learned nothing out of it. I mean, it was fun. Started a company, it got acquired, we put some money in the bank. Really, it was all fun. But I think the learning came from the losses. The fact that you failed, we asked ourselves a lot of questions. So to me, the first lesson that I would share is you learn a lot more from failure than you do from success. The second lesson that I would share is that luck plays a very important role. Unfortunately, you can't buy luck online. You can't go to Amazon and order luck. So the anecdote I have, it's like 4 people playing cards. Everybody wants the ace of spades or whatever, but there's only one available, right? It's not that the others are playing a bad hand. It's just that you play with the hand that is dealt with. And we should not read too much into the success either, because the fact is, with a little bit of luck, I could be there and you could be here. So that's the second thing. So don't get carried away too much by success. And the third is, some things are just meant to be as it is. it's important for entrepreneurs to get very, very closely involved and attached to their companies, but I think beyond a certain level, emotional involvement becomes very hard to take. And we must be prepared to cut our losses and move at the right time. And I think entrepreneurs fail miserably in that. And I can understand, I have also gone through the same problem. It's very difficult to say, this is it. So that's the other thing that I would share. And the fourth thing that I would share, and this is based on a whole lot of media things that I keep reading, is never, irrespective of what happens, never ever compromise on personal integrity. I think people get tempted. Wealth is a problem. Short-term success is a problem. You should never compromise on personal integrity. I mean, if you keep that as your beacon, then I think irrespective of what happens, it doesn't matter. And the last but the most important lesson that I share with most people everywhere is, the fact is 97, 98, 99% of ventures started by entrepreneurs will fail. That's the nature of the beast. But I think 100% of entrepreneurs succeed. And the reason I say that is because the act of starting up is a success. The
spent on advertising, right? If that could go into a discount to the user or better R&D, it would make a much better product. And you've got examples now like the Dollar Shave Club, right? Where they've taken a very simple FMCG product like a razor and built a billion-dollar company purely based on pull, right? So going back to my closing statement would be, identify a small problem, even if it's only for what you think maybe 1,000 or 10,000 people. If you solve it correctly, you never know where that rabbit hole could sort of eventually end up.
Got it, got it. So, Abhi, just before you go, I know that we're under severe time pressure, so with your permission, we'll just call this a wrap. So ladies and gentlemen, I want you to give a big round of applause to all the panelists out there. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much.
You know, these discussions are so engaging that we could go on, and it's really sad that we run short of time, and because of that paucity, we have to move ahead. But Ashwin Dias, Abhishek Rumta, Piyush Surana, and K. Vaitishwaran, thank you very much for giving us such an engaging, and of course, Kiruba yourself, what a wonderful moderator you have been. So may I request Pradeep Agarwal and Akhil Bandhupal to kindly come up here, please. Akhil Pal, are you here? We would need you up here to honor the panelists. Akhil Bandhupal and Pradeep Agarwal, are you here? Narendra Mukherjee, would you come up here, please, former chairman, and Ina Bose, please, up here to do the honors for us. And Kiruba, can we have you up here as well? And may I request you to greet Ashwin? Can we have the memento up here, please? Ashwin Dias. I know. And next in line, Abhishek Rumta, Piyush Surana, and Vaitish as well. And can you keep the mementos ready? Abhishek Rumta. Piyush Surana. Ina Bose. And finally, Sri K. Vaitishwaran. With all our affection and gratitude are these mementos and gifts given to all of you, sir. And can we pose for a photograph as well, all of you, all the panelists up here. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, moderators.